I smoothed my simple black dress as I pulled into the circular driveway of my Aunt Margaret's mansion. The late September sun glinted off dozens of luxury cars. Mercedes, BMWs, even my Uncle James's new Porsche. My used Honda Civic looked exactly like what they expected from me. Modest, struggling, unremarkable. Perfect. The invitation to this year's family reunion had arrived 3 weeks ago, heavy cream cardstock with gold embossing. Celebrating the Martinez family legacy, it proclaimed in elegant script. I almost didn't come. After 15 years of snide comments and thinly veiled pity, I had better things to do than subject myself to another round of family hierarchy games. But today was different. Today, I had a reason to be here. Emily, you actually came. My mother's voice carried across the manicured lawn, a mix of surprise and embarrassment. She hurried over in her designer dress, already looking apologetic. I wasn't sure if you'd. Well, you've been so busy with your little job. I gave her a quick hug, breathing in her familiar perfume. Wouldn't miss it, Mom. Did you park around back? I can have James's son move your car. It's a bit visible here in front. It's fine where it is. I smiled, patting her arm. How's everyone? She launched into updates as we walked toward the house. Cousin David's new partnership at his law firm, Isabella's expansion of her medical practice, Marcus's recent feature in Business Weekly, success stories, all of them. The Martinez family specialty. The grand foyer was already crowded with relatives, all dressed to impress. Aunt Margaret's crystal chandelier threw rainbow prisms across silk blouses and tailored suits. The air smelled of expensive cologne and competition. Emily, a sharp voice cut through the chatter. My cousin Victoria appeared, champagne in hand, her diamond bracelet catching the light. I almost didn't recognize you without your store uniform. A few nearby relatives snickered. They thought I still worked at the mall bookstore where I'd started after college. It was easier to let them believe that. Good to see you too, Vicky. I kept my voice neutral, using the nickname she hated. She flinched slightly, but recovered with a practiced smile. It's Victoria now, actually. But how are you? Still at that entry-level position? You know, Marcus's firm is always hiring assistants if you need a real career path. And there it was, the first dig of what promised to be many. I opened my mouth to respond when another voice joined in. Leave her alone, Victoria. Not everyone is cut out for success. Emily's just different. My cousin Alexander, Alex to everyone except the board of his investment firm, stepped up beside Victoria. He'd been the golden child since we were kids, destined to carry the family name to new heights. Now he managed millions and never let anyone forget it. Thanks for the concern, I said quietly, but I'm doing fine. Alex raised his eyebrows. Fine? Emily, you're 34 and still renting that tiny apartment in the bad part of town. When was the last time you even took a real vacation? The family's worried about you. No, they weren't worried. They were embarrassed. The Martinez family prided itself on achievement, on status, on winning. In their eyes, I was the cautionary tale. What happened when you didn't follow the prescribed path to success? If they only knew. I excused myself and made my way to the open bar, ordering a sparkling water with lime. Around me, conversations buzzed with business deals and vacation homes, private school admissions, and country club memberships. My Uncle James was holding court near the fireplace, describing his latest acquisition. Picked up this struggling tech firm for pennies on the dollar, he boasted. They had good bones but terrible management. Sometimes you have to be ruthless in business. I sipped my water, hiding a smile. James had no idea I'd been in the room for that deal. Sitting quietly at the end of the conference table, watching him negotiate with my board. He hadn't even glanced at me. Everyone. Aunt Margaret's voice rang out. Please join us in the dining room. Lunch is served. The crowd shifted, designer shoes clicking on marble floors. I found my assigned seat near the far end of the massive table, away from the successful branches of the family tree. My mother shot me an apologetic look from her spot near the head of the table. Still can't believe they seated you with us regular folk, my cousin Peter Stage whispered from across the table. Usually they keep the family disappointments in the kitchen. More Snickers. I focused on arranging my napkin, letting their words wash over me. Just a few more hours. So Emily, Alexander called down the table, his voice carrying deliberately. Tell us what's new with you. Any exciting developments in the book-stacking world? The table got quiet, waiting for my response. This was their favorite game, putting me on the spot, watching me squirm. I could feel Victoria's smug smile, see Alex's false concern. Actually, I said softly, there have been some changes. Oh, Victoria leaned forward. Finally got promoted to manager? Not exactly. I reached for my phone just as servers began bringing out the first course. Some sort of fancy salad with ingredients I couldn't pronounce. Well, don't keep us in suspense. Alexander laughed. What's the big news? Did you organize the self-help section alphabetically? The table erupted in laughter. Even my mother gave a weak smile, though she wouldn't meet my eyes. I let the moment stretch, taking a small bite of salad. Then I set down my fork and looked directly at Alexander. I've been meaning to talk to you about the Thompson account, I said calmly. He blinked. Excuse me. Your firm's handling of the Thompson portfolio. I've been reviewing the numbers, and I have some concerns about the risk exposure. The color drained from his face. How do you know about? Oh, and Victoria? I turned to my cousin, who had suddenly stopped laughing. The audit of your medical billing practices should be wrapped up by next week. I'm sure everything's in order, but you might want to double-check those Medicare claims from last quarter. The silence at the table was absolute. Even the servers had stopped moving. What? What are you talking about? Victoria's voice shook slightly. How would you know anything about my practice? I smiled and reached for my laptop bag. That's actually why I came today. I have something to share with the family. Emily. My mother's voice was sharp. What's going on? I opened my laptop, pulled up the email I'd received yesterday, and turned the screen so they could see the headline. Martinez Holdingius Konpledee ACQUIITION of Lee GACY P8RTERS GUROB NEU CEO NNOUNCD. Below was a photo of me shaking hands with the former CEO, Alexander and Victoria's father, who had no idea his own niece was the anonymous buyer he'd been negotiating with for months. You see, I said into the stunned silence, I've spent the last 10 years building something. While you were all busy mocking my little job, I was learning, watching growing. That bookstore. I bought it 3 years ago. Then I bought the whole chain. Then I started acquiring other businesses, quietly, through shell companies and holding firms. I looked at my Uncle James, including that struggling tech firm you thought you were buying last month. Sorry about that, by the way. I had to outbid you at the last minute. The sound of a glass shattering made everyone jump. Alexander had knocked over his wine. but he didn't seem to notice the spreading red stain. That's impossible," he stammered. "Legacy Partners is a multi-billion-dollar company. You couldn't possibly have that kind of money." I finished for him. "Funny how appearances can be deceiving. Would you like to see my portfolio? Or maybe just your new employment contract? I'll be reviewing all executive positions next week." Victoria's face had gone from pale to green. Her medical practice was owned by Legacy Partners. So was Alexander's investment firm. So were at least a dozen other businesses represented at this table. "As of 9 this morning," I continued, "I'm the CEO of Legacy Partners Group, which makes me—" I paused, enjoying the moment. "Your boss." The silence that followed was the sweetest sound I'd ever heard. The crystal water glasses on the dining table trembled as my Uncle James slammed his fist down. "This is absurd," he roared. "Some kind of sick joke." I calmly pulled out my phone and dialed a number on speaker. It rang twice. "Ms. Martinez." A crisp, professional voice answered. "The papers are ready for your signature. Shall I have them messengered to your location?" "Yes, Sarah. And please send copies of the organizational chart to all Legacy Partners subsidiary emails. Effective immediately. Of course, Ms. Martinez. The board is eager to begin transition meetings on Monday." I ended the call and looked around the table. Would anyone like to check their work email? The sound of phones being frantically pulled from pockets filled the silence. Victoria's hands were shaking so badly she could barely type her password. Alexander just sat there, staring at me like he was seeing a ghost. "Emily." My mother's voice was barely a whisper. "How?" I took a slow sip of water, remembering all the family dinners where I'd sat quietly, absorbing their insults while building my plan. "It started the day Alex mocked my business degree from the state university," I said, meeting his eyes. "Remember that? You said community college might have been more my speed." He swallowed hard, but didn't speak. That same day, I took my savings, all $12,000 of it, and bought stock in a small educational software company. Everyone thought I was crazy. 6 months later, Microsoft acquired them. I turned that investment into $180,000. But you live in that tiny apartment," Victoria sputtered. "You drive a Honda." Because I was investing everything. While you were buying designer handbags, I was buying companies. While you were posting vacation photos from the Maldives, I was sitting in boardrooms under different names. Shell companies, holding corporations, private equity firms. I built them all quietly, carefully, with no one paying attention to the quiet girl from the bad side of the family. Aunt Margaret's hands gripped her silverware like weapons. Why? Why all the secrecy? I laughed softly. Because of this exact moment. Because every time you dismissed me, underestimated me, treated me like the family failure, you made it easier. No one suspects the person they're too busy looking down on. The bookstore, my mother said slowly, you really own it. I own the entire chain. 63 locations across 12 states. It was my first major acquisition. I kept working there because it was the perfect cover. Who would suspect the quiet assistant manager was actually the owner? Alexander finally found his voice. Our father's company. You can't. He would never sell to. To me. I finished. He didn't know he was selling to me. The purchase was made through Palmer Global Ventures, one of my holding companies. As far as he knew, he was selling to a European investment group. I sat in every meeting, taking notes in the corner. He never once looked at me. The sound of heels clicking on marble made everyone turn. Sarah, my executive assistant, stood in the doorway holding a leather portfolio. The papers, Ms. Martinez, and the organizational charts have been distributed. A chorus of phone notifications pinged around the table. I watched as my relatives opened the emails, their faces shifting from disbelief to shock to fear as they saw their names listed under mine in the corporate hierarchy. "You can't do this," Victoria said, but her voice trembled. "You can't just take over everything." "Actually, I can." And I did. Legally, ethically, and completely. I stood up, smoothing my simple dress. "Now, shall we discuss those Medicare billing irregularities? Or would you prefer to start fresh on Monday?" She sank back in her chair, defeated. "Emily," my mother tried again. "All these years, why didn't you tell me?" I looked at her, remembering all the times she'd apologized for my failures, tried to hide me from important family events, suggested smaller dreams. "Would you have believed me?" I asked softly. The tears in her eyes answered for her. "The board meeting is scheduled for Monday at 9 a.m., I announced to the table. "Attendance is mandatory for all subsidiary executives. We'll be discussing the new direction of Legacy Partners Group, including performance reviews and organizational changes." "You're going to fire us," Alexander said numbly. "No, Alex. I'm going to do what you all taught me. I'm going to be ruthless in business." I picked up my laptop and turned to Sarah. "Please have the cars brought around. I think this family reunion is over." "Wait," Victoria called out as I reached the door. "What do you want? Money? Position? Name your price." I turned back one last time, looking at the family that had spent years making me feel small. "What I want," I said quietly, "is for you all to remember this moment. Remember how it feels to realize you never really knew me at all. And on Monday, remember who signed your paychecks." As I walked out to my Honda Civic, which I kept precisely because it bothered them so much, I could hear the chaos erupting behind me. Accusations, excuses, the sound of a family realizing they'd created their own worst nightmare. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Your father's attorney called. He wants to discuss your purchase of the family estate." I smiled. They didn't even know about that yet. The best revenge isn't served cold. It's served quietly, patiently, one piece at a time, until there's nothing left to do but sit back and watch them realize how badly they underestimated you. And this was just the beginning. Monday morning arrived crisp and clear. I stood in my private elevator, ascending to the top floor of Legacy Partners headquarters, watching the city skyline emerge through the glass. My reflection showed not the simple black dress from the reunion, but a tailored white power suit that cost more than my cousin Victoria's car. Today there was no need to hide. "Good morning, Ms. Martinez." Sarah greeted me, tablet in hand. "The boardroom is prepared, and security is in place as requested. Any early arrivals?" "Your Uncle James has been pacing the lobby since 8 a.m. Alexander and Victoria are sitting in their cars in the parking garage. They've been there for 30 minutes, but haven't come up yet." I smiled, afraid to face the new reality. "Also," Sarah continued, "your mother called 6 times this morning. She's apparently outside your apartment building, wondering why you're not there." Of course she was. They still thought I lived in that small apartment on the east side. None of them knew about my penthouse overlooking the lake, or my house in the Hamptons, or any of the other properties I'd acquired over the years. "Send a car for her," I said. "She should be here for this." The boardroom was impressive, all glass and chrome, with views of the city in every direction. The long mahogany table gleamed under recessed lighting, each place set with a leather portfolio and a tablet. At the head of the table, a single high-backed chair waited. My chair. By 8:55, they began filing in. First the independent board members, then the subsidiary executives, and finally my family. They moved like chastened schoolchildren, uncertain where to sit, avoiding my gaze. Victoria had clearly spent hours on her appearance, perhaps thinking she could charm her way out of this. Alexander wore his most expensive suit, but his confident swagger was gone. Uncle James looked like he hadn't slept in days. My mother slipped in last, escorted by Sarah. She froze when she saw me, taking in my appearance, my position at the head of the table, the way everyone else waited for my permission to sit. "Please, take your seats," I said, my voice carrying easily through the hushed room. "We have a lot to cover." The sound of chairs moving, papers shuffling, nervous throats clearing. 24 people waiting for the axe to fall. First, I began. "Let me officially welcome you to the new Legacy Partners Group. As your CEO, I want to be clear about our path forward." I tapped my tablet, and the screens around the room came to life with charts and projections. "Ms. Martinez," Uncle James interrupted, his voice strained, but trying for authority. "Before we continue, I think we should discuss the legitimacy of this situation." "Your objection is noted," I replied coolly, and dismissed. The acquisition was fully legal, approved by the board, and filed with the SEC. "But since you brought it up," I nodded to Sarah, who began distributing additional documents. "These are the complete financial records of every subsidiary under the Legacy Partners umbrella, including some interesting discrepancies in your division, Uncle James." He turned pale, papers trembling in his hands. "Don't worry," I continued. "I'm not interested in pursuing criminal charges. Consider this your chance at a fresh start. Clean books, clean operations, under new management." "You're blackmailing us," Victoria burst out, "using our own companies against us." "No, Victoria. I'm offering you a choice. You can either work within the new structure, following proper protocols and ethical guidelines, or you can resign. Your medical practices licenses and accreditations are tied to Legacy Partners. Think carefully about your decision." Alexander hadn't spoken yet. He sat staring at the financial reports, his face ashen. "You knew," he said finally. "All those years, at every family gathering, you were watching us, learning our weaknesses, planning this." "I learned from the best," I replied. "Wasn't it you who told me that business is about finding leverage and using it wisely?" My mother's voice shook as she spoke up. "Emily, please. We're your family." "Yes, you are. And as family, you taught me some valuable lessons. Like how appearance matters more than substance. How money equals worth. How to smile while cutting someone down." I stood, placing my hands on the table. "But most importantly, you taught me how to wait." I clicked to the next slide, showing the new organizational structure. Effective immediately, all subsidiaries will undergo complete audits. New compliance protocols are being implemented. Performance reviews will be conducted quarterly. And yes, some of you will be replaced. The room erupted in protests and pleas. I let them go on for exactly 30 seconds before raising my hand for silence. However, I continued when quiet returned. Those who choose to stay, who prove they can adapt and work ethically within the new system, will find opportunities for growth. Real growth, not the smoke and mirrors some of you have been hiding behind. I looked directly at Alexander. Your investment firm has potential, cousin. But your risk management is sloppy. Fix it, or I'll find someone who will. He nodded slowly, understanding the reprieve being offered. Victoria, your medical practice could be revolutionary in community care. Focus on patient outcomes instead of billing manipulation, and you'll have my full support. She wiped a tear quickly, trying to maintain composure. Uncle James, I turned to him last. Your technology division is bleeding money because you refuse to innovate. Either embrace change or retire. Your choice. The next hour was detailed, methodical, and absolute. I laid out new policies, expectations, and consequences. Some cried. Some argued. Some sat in stunned silence. But all of them finally understood exactly who they were dealing with. As the meeting wound down, my mother approached my chair. The house I grew up in, she said quietly. You bought that too, didn't you? Last month, I confirmed, along with all the family properties. Don't worry, I'm not evicting anyone. Consider it insurance against future family trauma. She smiled sadly. When did you become so powerful? I always was, Mom. You just never saw it. The room slowly emptied, my family members and executives filtering out to face their new reality. Sarah approached with more documents requiring my signature. Oh, and one more thing. I called out as they reached the doors. The annual family reunion will continue as scheduled. Same time, same place next year. I smiled. But this time, I'm hosting. Alexander paused in the doorway. Why keep doing it? Why maintain any family connection after everything? Because you all need to remember, I said simply. Every year, every gathering, every holiday. Remember the quiet girl you mocked. Remember the power you never saw coming. Remember that success isn't about who shouts the loudest, but who plans the longest. They filed out silently, leaving me alone in my boardroom, looking out over the city I'd spent a decade quietly conquering. My phone buzzed. A message from my real estate agent about another property acquisition. Below it, a text from Victoria. I'm sorry for everything. Too little, too late. But maybe, just maybe, they'd finally learned something valuable. Never underestimate the quiet ones. We're usually just waiting for the perfect moment to show you exactly who we are.